Good afternoon. For those of you who were not there this morning, my name is Julien Blanchez. I've been 9 years with Google, worked the last 4 years alongside the engineering, security, and compliance teams in California. I'm just back in Brussels now, located from Brussels. And from Brussels, I support the engagement towards regulators, towards large prospects or very sensitive prospects, prospects with handling very sensitive data, even if they're not large. And I facilitate the communication between the European market and the teams abroad. What I want to do in this session is go deeper into the summary message that I tried to compile into 10 minutes this morning. So sorry for those of you who were there already this morning. There will be some repeats. But in each time, I will go deeper. And my objective is to share with you some of the talking points, some of the narratives that we use when we talk to these people, these senior decision makers, that we need to help shift and nudge in the direction of the cloud. So there will be some of that. I will be addressing also some of the key messages that need to be heard in the market. I have more content than is needed. I'll try to keep it to 35 minutes and keep 10 minutes for questions. So as I talk and you have questions, feel free to note them down, and I'll be happy to take questions. Even though this is a tricky exercise in public with a large crowd, there's always someone that has a trickier question than the other. But I'm happy to go in that direction. So I will do this in 2 steps. The first step will be for me to go into the technology, and then I will cover more the compliance side of things, because it's a very important topic here in Europe. Before I start, I'm going to ask you to do a short visualization exercise. If you are in meditation, you know what visualization is. You close your eyes, and for a few seconds, you just picture for yourself that one person in your family, in your close group of friends, that is still today, saving all of his money, his lifelong savings, under a mattress in his bedroom, her bedroom, and possibly, a shotgun in the living room. And you close your eyes and you think about that person. We all have that person in our families or group of friends, behaving that way. Or maybe we don't, because nobody does that anymore. And the reason I'm using this little trick is because I want to introduce a fact now that an increasing number of people are making a parallel between what is happening with the cloud today with what has been happening with the banks world and the banking revolution 100 to 150 years ago. What the banks did and managed to do over a quite long period of time, they managed to convince every single one of us to take the most valuable belongings they had away from these silos of sparings and bring this into what was then called capital. And what capital allowed to do was absolutely unthinkable before capital was created. Motorways, skyscrapers, research program, quest to the moon, you name it, this was all made possible because of capital. What is happening with data today and with the cloud today is very similar. Gradually, we receive the guarantees, we receive the commitments, we grow up with the idea that it is thinkable to take away the information that is very secure in these, in these small silos, and we agree to bring it together in these big amounts of data hosted in the cloud. And this allows for ideas to happen that were completely unthinkable even a few months ago. I remember presenting on driverless cars in Europe 3 years ago. You had people laughing in the room. Nobody laughs about driverless cars anymore, and these things are coming. Machine learning, virtual reality. These are all new technologies, new ideas that are powered by the cloud, made possible by the cloud. The banks brought something else than capital. They brought security. And today, we cloud providers stand bolder, I would say, than they would stand a couple of years back, saying we can play a similar role to what banks have played, when it comes to increase the security of the data. And there are a couple of technical reasons for this that I touched upon this morning that I want to go a little bit deeper on this afternoon. Then, as was mentioned this morning, you will all be there thinking, it's all fine and good. I understand, Google has the resource and the capacities to protect the data, but I still don't trust you. And so this is where I will go more into details about what are the tools, what are the clauses, what are the information that you need to engage into these discussions with yourself, with your stakeholders, with your customers, and see how long it takes, but progress in that direction to decide whether or not you want to move to the cloud. If I manage time well, I will have the time to share with you more tools. Maybe go a little bit deeper into the tools that I quickly snapped this morning that can help your organization be more compliant and get ready for the GDPR, among others. I also want to share a few of the personal tools that you can activate right now by the end of the day, or certainly during the weekend, on your own account. To significantly increase your security posture. And these are tools that are available on the consumer world of Google, but are easily activated on the organization side. And so your administrator or yourself can activate this for your organization. This process of assessing deeply, the technical capabilities in terms of security, and then building the trust and within the stakeholders to decide to move to the cloud, is not the process that you will pioneer into. I don't know if this is English, but that you will pioneer. Okay. Today, Google serves 6 million organizations. 3 million of them are NGOs, education organizations. The 3 other million are commercial organizations paying their licenses. And you recognize on these slides already names of companies that are handling extremely sensitive information. The one that we engage a lot with at the moment, we do joint events and we try to evangelize, is PwC. PwC, is rolling out 100 to 200,000 users at the moment across the world, and they're handling. How more sensitive can you be than tax information from your customers? You see names like Charles Schwab's, Deloitte. The Economist is an interesting example. The source, the life and death of some of the sources being handled there depends on the security of the data and how well it is managed. When we present in the south of Europe, I like to bring up the example of Le Monde. Le Monde is one of the dailies that has the most critical editorial line on Google, and yet they are using G Suite today to work. Airbus is another good example. There are some names that are not on this slide. And there's one in particular that is a very good example, and normally we don't talk about them because we don't have the marketing rights, but they blogged about it a few months ago, so I just now refer to the blog, and I encourage you to Google UK Cabinet Office. Okay, so the team of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is using G Suite for a year and a half now. And they are very happy about it. They were so happy they blogged about it. This is to give you an idea of the level of security and the level of privacy commitments these platforms in general. These are all Google customers, but this is the level of security that cloud providers have been able to give now to their customers. So, going into security itself, in the first part of the talk, and trying to understand what it is that makes cloud platform puts cloud platforms in such a positive spot when it comes to security. I talked about this model this morning, assess the capability to anticipate, assess the capability to defend, and assess the capability to react as a model that is widely used across the security industry to assess the security of any system. Would it be an IT system or a non-IT system? And I mentioned the fact, that Google operates these 7 platforms with more than 1 billion users, allowing us to test these platforms very, very broadly. If you think of what the business model has been for the last 18 years of Google, it has been to go around the web and make a copy of the entire web, for some parts of it close to real time. And this copy is being brought to our data centers. It is being indexed, and the search results are delivered in a few milliseconds. So of course, the indexing doesn't happen on the live web. It happens on the copy, and we deliver the search results on this copy. This gives you the idea of how much we know about what is fantastic about the web and that we share with you immediately, okay, in terms of search results. Also gives you an idea of all that we know that is terrible about the web that we also share with you. We share this in specific services. The most famous is called Safe Browsing. It's a package service in which we encapsulate this data, this information about the different websites and what they contain that could be harmful. And this service is shared with Mozilla and Safari, and so most of the web browsers use that information to protect you. When you are going to enter a harmful website, you will receive a message that tells you, caution, if you proceed beyond, this could be harmful to your computer. Normally, when there are no spots, I scan the audience and I try to spot the people going yes, 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 because then I know who is going on these sites. But here I have the spots, so I can't see anything. I talked about safety net this morning. Out of the 2 billion Android devices, 400 million polled daily to gather the health information and paint that landscape, the threat landscape. You might know that Google Play is a fully fledged payment platform, completely PCI DSS compliant, that handles the payment of more than 1 billion users. And Gmail serves tens of thousands of doctors and medical practitioners around the world today, so it has to be compliant. It had to comply with very stringent healthcare regulation, namely the HIPAA regulation in the United States that is very demanding. So this gives you an idea of how this platform is being tested and allows us to gather so much information. Out of all that information, there is one clear direction that is important to keep in mind if you try to figure out what is the direction that the Google security teams are, one of the important directions that the Google security teams are trying to follow. And it is summarized by this slide. It's public information, but we have similar data in our logs. Almost all successful incidents make use of a vulnerability that is older than 1 year. That means that the problem lies with us, users, us, intermediate users, administrators, being overwhelmed with the complexity of having to constantly update, patch, keep everything updated and under control. And even if your teams and your security teams would have infinite budget and access to great research resources and hire the best security researchers in the country and the world, you're fighting an uphill battle because 2/3 of the incidents make use of login credentials that have been shared by your users willingly. And the reason for this is, according to this public data, it requires less than 8 emails to your organization to acquire the login information of one of your employees. We ran a survey in 2014 with the University of San Diego, and our results for the last data was 43%. There's actually less than 3 well-crafted emails to gather the login credential of one of your employees. So what does that mean for large cloud platforms in general, and the mission that the Google security teams, one of the directions that the Google security team set for itself is that we must use our capabilities, the technical capabilities that we have, to offload part of that complexity from the user. We must resolve that complexity problem without imposing any trade-off on the convenience that you have been used to have on your devices or on your systems. Because we all know that the least trade-off on convenience that is being asked, you just try to go around the security. I notice it with myself. I notice it everybody. You know, it just requires, it's just a couple of seconds more, you know, that you need each time you log in, and then you will try to avoid that threshold. So how can large cloud platforms develop systems that solve this complexity and avoid the trade-off, forcing for a trade-off? So I touched upon the basics here. I want to go a little bit more in the detail. I touched upon the basics this morning. I want to go a little bit more in the detail. So these infrastructures were built from a blank slate, you know, not having to cope with the complexity. But of course, they grew up being very complex systems. I mentioned, you know, these 2 billion lines of codes and 50,000 engineers, or 30,000 engineers creating 50,000 change requests per day. And I mentioned intelligent automation, you know, handling all this and being able to manage all this. If you want to picture for yourself a security problem that has been solved by that kind of automation, you think about how you were using emails at the end of the 90s. And you remember how email was going to die. Email was unusable because of spam. There was so much spam, email was a dead tool. If you're using Gmail today, you have less than 0.01% of spam in your inbox. And the reason for this is that these systems are reading your emails and have become very, very good at predicting what is relevant, what is not relevant for you, what is threatening, what is not threatening to you. And when you know that spam is one of the biggest vectors for distribution of malware, this is a significant win. Actually, one of the wins I don't really understand why we don't talk more about. If you want to project that into the future, and you want to think, how can this technology help me in the future, addressing some of the big security issues? Think about authentication. You know, these very bad password hygiene that we all have. You know, reusing the same password across different websites. I don't want to, you know, who does that? Who doesn't do that? We know that a way to solve this, and one of the important ways to solve this, will be behavioral authentication. You know, making sense of the different signals that we share with our devices, with our watches, how we look, how we sound, how we handle your device. If we combine all these signals together, using these systems, we're able to identify you by a factor 10,000 more accurate than a normal digit password. When we're able to identify you so precisely, we're then able to authenticate you, sometimes hopefully in real time, so that when I'm using my mobile phone and I access the core Google services, you know, my phone authenticates me to these systems. When I pass my phone to my son, automatically the access rights drop down to Pokemon Go. This is the kind of technology that is not future music. This is the kind, you know, proof of concepts are there, SDK is there, you know, under trusted testers, and we are working with partners to that. Of course, the road is long. There's a lot of privacy concerns, a lot of discussions to have with the community and with society. But these are the kind of things that large cloud providers and Google specifically will be embedding in their technology as we grow, right? And you will be benefiting directly from this as we grow. I'm linking this slide with the concept of security by design. It's fantastic that, you know, the regulator imposes now security by design, and when you will be reviewing the GDPR, you will see this term, security by design. Think already about evolving this design. You know, how can this design adapt and evolve to the landscape? This is what these technologies will allow. The second concept that I brought up this morning was the control over the entire stack. Okay, the biggest concern of, if you ask a chief security officer today, and I remember asking the question to a chief security officer at Google, what is keeping him awake at night? One of the things that he will bring up, he or she will bring up, is the supply chain of the components. How are you sure that the components you bring into your systems in your organization are secure? Because of the size that large cloud platforms and Google in particular, we've been adamant on this topic. Because of the size we operate at, we have the luxury of designing our own hardware, our own chips, you know, controlling and designing our own custom operating systems. And throughout the different layers of the stack, all the way to the mobile interface, we have kept a very high level of control. I mentioned this morning how this allows for faster, or relatively faster, incident detection and relatively easier incident remediation. Again, when you think of the words of the regulator today, breach notification, how fast can you react? Having that kind of transparency and homogeneity in the system is something that will play in your favor. Actually, I want to talk about this slide before. I will get to the other one after. One of the important layers here that is most illustrative is the storage layer. How do we store the data, and how do we protect the data when we store it? Data at Google is when you enter information in a Gmail or in a Google Docs, before you even send the email or share the document, the data that you have typed in is instantly chunked into pieces, several kilobytes to a couple of megabytes in size maximal. Each of these pieces is replicated at least 3 times on the same server, and at least 3 times in the same data center, and at least across 2 data centers across the world. This is how it goes all the time when you use Gmail or Google Docs. Each of these chunks of data is then encrypted with a data encryption key. The data encryption key is located very close to the chunk so that it can decrypt very fast. But of course, there are so many millions, hundreds of millions of data encryption keys. Each of these data encryption keys is encrypted with a key encryption key. And the key encryption keys are stored in a key store. And they are replicates of the key store in approximately 10,000 locations around the world. All access to the key store is controlled by access control lists and logged. So it is, we used to never communicate this before. This is how we were able to explain to financial regulators and other regulators of the world how we were sure that we were in control of who is accessing your data. Because it is virtually impossible to go through these 2 layers of encryption without, it is impossible to go through these 2 layers of encryption without accessing the key store and leaving a trace in the log. Then I spoke about the infrastructure and how having your data replicated across a global infrastructure, 15 data centers across the world, 4 in Europe, I mentioned them this morning, Finland, Ireland, Holland, and Belgium. There's a slight competition between Holland and Belgium at the moment for who has the biggest data center. So even at Google. Yeah. So, and 2 more coming actually very soon in Europe. So an expansion of this network. But the size of these data centers is not the most important piece of information I find. Very relevant information is the connection of these dark fibers that connect the data centers. Proprietary fibers. We lay out our own cables through the ocean or take part into consortia where we have a direct control on the cables. And that makes us puts us in a very good position to address latency. I mentioned latency is very important when you offer a collaboration solution, but also in terms of security, we are very much in control of our destiny. For many of our customers, this is a critical decision point. We talk publicly about the Hollywood. The Hollywood industry is a big fan of Google Cloud at the moment. They are using a lot our computing powers and storage powers. You can understand how sensitive any movie is, and they do not want this to leak, and how aggressively they can be attacked. And they having the benefit of this these encryption, these own proprietary pipes through the ocean, self-encrypted. Or encrypted under our own control is very interesting to them. So this is for the connection between the data centers. The yellow points that you see there represent our Google front ends. So the connection points between the Google infrastructure and the public internet. And this gives you an idea of the amount of options we can play with when you come under DDoS attack, for example. It is then very easy, and it happens actually automatically, to load balance the traffic from any of those Google front ends to make sure that you remain online, even though 1/2 of the world is being under attack. This is the kind of infrastructure that allows a large public cloud provider like Google to aim for what we called zero recovery point objective. So recovery point objective of 0, which means in case of major catastrophe, 0 data loss. And 0 recovery time objective, which means in case of major catastrophe, instant failover. You do not see anything. Every year, Google, at least every year, Google simulates major catastrophes. So we shut down portions of the world. You have never noticed any of these drills. In the 9 years I've been at Google, and I'm 12 hours per day in front of these tools, once I was thinking, wow, there is something going on, and indeed, I never knew exactly what it was, but there was something. So these infrastructure are highly redundant and are used to offer that. Lastly, and very important when we switch to the compliance discussion, this is the infrastructure that allows us to aim to deliver the same level of security for everybody in the world. You might be tired sometimes of the idealistic stance of Google, but this is very important to the teams. There is no way that we will offer more security to a German than to a Pakistani or to a US citizen. Okay? We want to offer the same level of security for everybody, and so whenever we hear you want to have data here and there, we're like, first of all, you might not know what you wish. Locating data might not increase your security. Secondly, this is really not what we are aiming to deliver to the world. Quickly, another thing that Google has been able to solve is the biggest problem of the chief security officers today is the access to human resources. How do you convince the right brains to come and work on these tough problems in your organizations? Even if you're a large bank in your country, of course there are several that you will, but we have a tremendous advantage there. And even though we have many of these researchers in-house working on these tough problems, we acutely know that it is not 700 people that will solve security on the web. And so these guys are constantly collaborating with the research community. And actually, for having worked alongside these guys, I realized they did not come to work for Google. They come to work for Dirk, John, who was their guru when they were doing their PhD, and they want to keep on solving that problem. If Dirk or John goes to another company, probably they will follow. The importance, this community lives as a separate live, that's an understatement. So one of the things that they are really proud of is the vulnerability reward program, where we actively encourage anybody around the world to attack our systems. Many of the questions we receive from our institutional customers is, under what condition can we pen test you? Any condition. It's all fair game. Give it your best shot. The email that we send to people that ask us this question is literally 3 lines. Give it your best shot. We don't want to know anything. The only thing is, if you find a vulnerability, tell us, otherwise we can't pay you. We've paid already more than $4 million in rewards. The researcher that received the most money received $200,000. If they decide to give this to charity, we basically double the amount. And believe it or not, many of them give these things to charity. So this open collaboration model is the last thing I want to say, because it's in the world of security, it's a very important point. At this point, I hope we have not exaggerated on the technology aspects, and we're not reaching at the nauseam point. I want to pivot to compliance, and tell you what are the tools that we give you, okay, to increase that confidence in the system. This is probably the most important slide of the entire presentation. The only thing you really need to remember, if anything, is when you sign a contract with a cloud provider, would it be Google Cloud, Amazon, Microsoft, or any other, you are being defined as a data controller in control of the data. And the cloud provider is being defined as a data processor. And the data processor may not use your data for any other purpose than deliver you the service that you paid for. This is a cornerstone of the GDPR, cornerstone of all these contracts, and a very important notion that also explains why there will be no advertising by Google, or no usage by Google of the data you put into our system, because it is contractually written just like in any other contract. Before you write into the contracts, you will have access to all the information that the regulators now expects you to have before you sign a contract. What is the exact location of your data? So you receive the location of data centers. We may not be able to tell you in which data center the data is, but it is in some of these data centers. The sub-processors. Who are the sub-processors? The availability of the systems is available through public dashboards, so you can see at any given point of time when these systems are available, when they have been down, and you can make your own assessment there, is it sufficient or not. And importantly, the certifications. All large cloud providers have undergone now the major certifications. You will recognize, if you're familiar to that world, 27001, which certifies for computing security, 2717 for cloud computing, 2718 for handling of PII. So these are the gold standards on these topics. The second layer are the SOC. Audit reports are very stringent, very well recognized. You can access, we provide you access to the SOC 2 reports under NDA. So the SOC 3 is public, you can obtain it. The SOC 2 is 210 pages of granular controls. It is also available for our customers under NDA, so if you really want to check every single control, security control, it is available. I just want to stop onto one badge, which is the FedRAMP badge, because it's a clear differentiator between Google and the other cloud providers. All cloud providers, major cloud providers, have achieved this certification, which allows cloud to deliver services to the federal agencies of the United States government, including defense. And so, yes, we have many defense customers using Google Cloud and having the data onto the infrastructure. What is specific about Google certification is Google is the only provider that certified the entire infrastructure, as opposed to our competitors who certified subsets of the infrastructure. So they've built specific farms that have received that badge, and it is these farms of servers that are serving these federal agencies and delivering that kind of security. When you engage with Google, you receive exactly the same level of security that we guarantee to Rockwell Collins, for example, a major defense contractor of the United States, or Theresa May, for that matter. You have the information, you get to the moment where you sign the contract, and there are a few things that you really have to pay attention to. The scope of processing, I mentioned, absolutely demanded by the regulators today. The processor may not touch the data for any other purpose, contractually committed. Intellectual property, you keep the intellectual property of your data. Seems normal when you think about machine learning and the intelligence that you will develop using machine learning tools on your big data sets. Very important that you also keep that knowledge and that doesn't come into anybody else's hands. Portability, when you have developed 30 petabytes of data in 10 years, how do you walk out? Are we going to help you? How many trucks of hard drives do we have to bring, to the data centers? These are literal questions that are being asked now with some prospects. Very important is the access to data from third-party jurisdiction. What happens if a foreign judge asks for data of one of your employees? You have to get back to the concept of controller and processor. In the world of the cloud, as opposed to the consumer world of Google, in the world of the cloud, we are in a very comfortable position. When the judge comes to us, we say, hey, we are only processors. You should ask the controller. And we redirect the request from the judge to you. And you decide how you want to go with that request. Most of the time, you will want to collaborate with justice. Sometimes you might not want to collaborate with justice. It is really up to you. The moment you feed back to us a formal legal decision that you refuse, this is where it stops for us. You keep on discussing with the judge and with justice. So, of course, there are some fringe cases where we are not allowed to tell your employee or you, that we get requests for the data. Pedophilia, organized crime, drug smuggling, imminent crime into an investigation. These are typical situations where the lawmaker has provided that there will be no misstep to impede into the execution of justice. Generally, the more regulated the customer I engage with, the more they know that. You know, if I engage with a bank and there are lawyers from the bank in the room, they just nod and they say, yes, proceed. You know, we also have these, they probably have these cases as often as we do. And this is, you know, we are not above the law. We do publish the number of cases. I need to hurry up. I'm out of time. I hope I'm not too slow. We do publish all the cases where we get these requests in what we call the transparency reports. Okay, if you're interested into that, you Google transparency reports. All large players have done this by now also, and you can find transparency reports from Twitter and other organizations. But you find by country, by year, how many requests have been executed. You know, it's interesting when I presented yesterday in Germany, and you know the Germans are very, very adamant on how much America can look into their systems. And I pointed to the reports and said you should go and check out because America made 13,000 requests last year. Germany made close to 10,000, and France, which is also very reactive, made close to 9,000. So all of a sudden you realize how important it is to put your data into an infrastructure that wants to defend everybody the same way, independently of the local perception of who wants to access what data when. So security and our commitments to keep the certifications that we talked about throughout the duration of the agreement. We don't just achieve the certification, let you sign, and then drop it. And of course, audit rights is a very important topic, depending on the sector where you operate in, and you know, your lawyers will be more or less adamant on these clauses. But more in summary, you know, these contracts allow you to come and verify that we do what we say we do. Of course, we don't like to have 6 million customers walking across our data centers. So this is not what is happening. You will not have access to our data centers. But we have mechanisms, okay, which allow you to check, have access to the detailed reports, and then propose some new controls. If some controls have not been done and you're not satisfied with the audit, you can inject, you know, new controls that will be included into the audit for the next cycle. At this point, we've reached the European discussion. Will it even fit with the European law? And here it's always useful, I find, to summarize what the European law actually says. Still today, the handling of personal data in Europe is regulated by a directive of 1995 that very specifically says it is not allowed to export European data unless adequate safety measures are in place. Quoting the law. Probably, hopefully, exactly. Sorry. Should have reviewed the text before presenting. But these adequate safety measures are summarized in the Safe Harbor, which was invalidated last year, replaced by Privacy Shield. Privacy Shield is heavily debated. European activists think it's not okay. Trump administration thinks it's not okay. At least these two agree on this topic. But it doesn't really matter. Because all large cloud providers, of course, rely on Privacy Shield as one of the mechanisms that is fully, you know, gives the full title to export data. But all cloud providers use the model contract clauses. And these are 12 clauses that have been devised by the data privacy authorities of Europe. And they proposed model clauses that all cloud providers should add to their contract. If these clauses are added to their contract, there is no more discussion. You may export data, personal data, outside of Europe. So these model contract clauses come into two shapes. I wanted to check what slide I had behind, and now you won't go back. Okay. Either standard model contract clauses or model contract clauses that have been approved by the common opinion process. And the common opinion process is a process through which the cloud providers proposes his model contract clause to the regulator, and the regulator officially approves these clauses, and they are binding. and there is no way a data privacy authority around Europe can then change his opinion and say, oh, by the way, no, you can't use Google, and you have to keep data in my country when you use Google. This is a binding opinion, including for Norway. Then comes the GDPR. The GDPR will replace the directive of 1995. And it is very important for all of you to receive that commitment. The deadline of the GDPR is coming fast. Okay, by May 2018, this new regulation will be enforced. And what the GDPR does, it increases a lot the power of the data privacy authorities to inspect what is being done with the data, what you do with your users' data and your employees' data and your customers' data, what we do with your data and all of your stakeholders' data. So the data privacy authorities have gained a lot of power, and they have also gained very impressive tools in terms of fines that can go up to 4% of the yearly global revenue of your company per incident. Okay? Some banks have many incidents. Anything have many incidents. I'm not throwing anything on banks here. So a lot of emotions. In general, on the positive side, I personally think that usually Europe is always lagging behind the United States when it comes to digital revolution, digital transformation. For once that we do something that really matters and that really the rest of the world is looking at, we should be proud as Europeans of the GDPR. And we should really embrace this as an opportunity to raise the trust of our entire society in the digital world and use this legislation to accelerate adoption. This is, by the way, what we see now. We see an acceleration of the demand for cloud services because of the increased risk, okay? And many stakeholders see an opportunity to. Key for the GDPR is that the GDPR does not change the rules for international data transfers. So again, Google Article 46 of the GDPR, because this is a very emotional and people have completely different opinions and ideas about it. The text is there. Article 46 of the GDPR very clearly states a controller or processor may transfer personal data to a third country or international organization if the controller processor has provided appropriate safeguards, which can take the shape of something like the privacy shield, model contract clauses, or new mechanisms like code of conducts and certification mechanisms that will come into place when the GDPR is launched. And Google is actively engaged into these other processes to make sure that even if privacy shield falls, even if model contract clauses would fall, there would be other mechanisms available. I don't think I want to repeat the advice I gave this morning about segmenting your decision process into a technical risk assessment, a legal risk assessment, a political risk assessment. Is your country or any of the countries you're active in engaged into data localization legislation like Russia, like China, and others in the Middle East? You need to have a cloud provider that can at the same time deliver the service in these countries and protect your information in these countries. And of course, the cultural risk is the fourth one. You might be forced to keep data in country because of cultural reasons. This is perfectly normal, but make sure that you make a distinction between these four layers when you make this decision. Because sometimes things get confused, and you might be taking the wrong technical and legal decision because of a cultural decision. I will go quickly over these ones because I touched upon this morning. So, and I want to have more time on the personal tools. Again, what I was trying to convey this morning was in the areas of responsibility that you keep, even as in terms of security and compliance, even as you move to the cloud, and if you use infrastructure as a service, you still have a lot of things that your customers and your regulators will be expecting you to do in terms of it. You can benefit from technologies. I spoke about authentication, strong authentication. These security keys and two-step authentication are very important to easily improve your security stance. Encryption one of the benefits of moving to the cloud and to moving to Google's cloud specifically, you benefit from encryption out of the box. You can either trust us to manage your keys. If you don't, you can manage your keys yourself. And if you don't trust us to even have access to the keys, you can also bring your own keys, and we don't have any access to the data at all. Don't lose the keys. This is serious. I mean, our guys are really panicked about customers losing the keys, and then the media going, Google lost the data. And like, And then we talked about DLP API. The example that I gave very briefly this morning about you as an employee organizing a party with for your children through your corporate email, and then this being archived in the corporate archive, and then it's coming back 10 years later, and the regulator asking your company, why did you keep the email addresses of these children in your email, is a real question we received from a customer. This is the real situation. This is to tell how complex this is going to become. And this is where technology and advanced technology can really help you. And you had a demo this morning, but this is an animation of the DLP API, scanning through a live chatbot also, and you see the feed coming in as the credit card number is being typed, it is being flagged. And so this technology can be applied. You can think of plugging this through our APIs into your technology and addressing some of the big challenges that are coming ahead. I want to summarize. Who knows this tool? All right, this is Netherlands. They all know, you know everything already. So if you don't know this tool, it's funny because there is no. I'm not going to make regional distinction. This is going the wrong way. If you don't know this tool, go to this tool as soon as you can, type your email address in, okay, and see how many times your login credentials have been put up for sale on the web. If they are out there and you're reusing the password that was associated to that login at the time, you have a problem. You should not reuse your password on different properties. To help you do that, install Password Alert, which is a Chrome extension on Chrome that will automatically detect whenever you reuse your password and stop you from doing that. If you install this in your organization, in your enterprise, it will also warn your administrator that you have reused your corporate password for another property and will immediately deactivate your password. At Google, we don't change passwords every 60, 90 days. I haven't changed my passwords in many years because I was caught 3 times. And I am not caught anymore. I never reuse my corporate passwords. And I know it very well, and that's what you need. And then lastly, second-step authentication. If you're not using second-step authentication today and you're still relying on your password to protect you online, you're not acting responsibly. You should activate second-step authentication, and you should activate hardware-based, I put the FIDO logo. The FIDO is a global alliance in which we participated that developed the standards. And these FIDO-enabled keys allow you to bring a second factor that is unphishable. It's basically a cryptographic signature that leaves your computer to the servers, and as opposed to standard two-step authentication when you have to type in a code. This code can be keylogged. This code can be captured by a man-in-the-middle attack. Second factor, traditional second factor, has weaknesses that are being abused increasingly now. And this is how we protect Google now for the last 4 years. And this is available on Gmail. You can order one of those on Amazon, could be between $6 and $15. You receive it, you activate it, you pair it to Gmail, and then you have a key for your home, a key for your car, and a key for your data. And you don't really mind if your password disappears. Any questions? I don't know if we have time for questions. We don't have time for questions.